Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Melissa Stevens. I'm the Executive Director of the Milken Institute Center for Strategic Philanthropy, and thank you so much for joining us for our conversation on philanthropy and transition, better ways to do good. To paraphrase Nobel laureate and economist George Stigler, a transition period is a period between two transition periods. So very profound. So in other words, things are always changing, and it's the pace of change is also changing. So the change is the fastest that it ever has been, and it's the slowest that it ever will be. And if we look out into the future, in philanthropy, over the next 30 to 40 years, we're expecting $30 to $40 trillion to change hands, from baby boomers down to Gen Xers and millennials. And so we know that philanthropy over the next 30, 40 years is not going to look exactly like how philanthropy has been done in the previous 30 to 40 years. So we want to unpack that a bit today and really explore how philanthropy is changing, how it's transitioning, how it will allow us to have more impact and to be more effective. And so we're going to do that by looking at changes in mindsets, changes in mechanisms for giving, changes in machines or the technology that we use to give, and changes in our metrics, how we're evaluating giving in a sea of nonprofit organizations. So we have a fantastic panel to have this conversation with. And all the way to my right, we have Silvia Bastante de Unverhau, who is a managing director at Co-Impact, which is a funding collaborative that's helping to realize impact at scale. To my immediate right, we have Alexandre Mars, who's a serial entrepreneur, investor, and founder and CEO of Epic, that is trying to make giving the norm and really democratize giving. To my left, we have Pam Norley, who's the president of Fidelity Charitable, the largest donor-advised fund and the second largest grant maker. And finally, last but not least, Fay Twersky, who is the director of the Effective Philanthropy Group at the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. So thank you all for joining us. So I want to open up with a lightning round here as we're thinking about transition. How extreme of a transition are we thinking about for philanthropy? Is it a complete metamorphosis, or are we going from philanthropy caterpillar to philanthropy butterfly? Is it just a maturation? Or are we growing up from a teenager to an adult? Or is it just a makeover, right? Are we just going from blonde to brunette in philanthropy? So, Silvia, start us out here. What do you think? How extreme of a transition is this?
So I think it is a maturation, but on an accelerated pace for sure. And I would cite 4 quick reasons we'll get into a little bit later. The first one is fundamentally there is more wealth creation and more concentration of wealth in the world, and especially entrepreneurial wealth, which has a higher propensity to give back. The second reason is the communication technologies, which have made the world a smaller place, but also created new ways of giving, which we hopefully will discuss. The other reason is the rise of the millennial generation and their expectations and what they want for their lives and their sense of purpose. And finally, I would cite the role models that are emerging, not only the traditional major philanthropists in the United States, but role models in many different parts of the world that are changing the face of philanthropy.
Great. All right. We've got 1 point for maturation.
Yes, I would say extreme. Before saying this, congrats to Milken. I'm the only man and 4 women, so I feel outnumbered, but that's really neat. So congratulations for this. Extreme. I think for one reason, for years and for decades, only one generation was trying to do good, whereas just the generation when you get retired, so the baby boomers, for example. The beauty of what we see now, they have 3 generations at the same time. Baby boomers, that's the usual one. But something very interesting, the Gen X, they feel bad about what they didn't do for the last 30 years. It's very interesting. A lot of people I can meet every single day, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, they're saying, what have we done? What have we done, all of us? And how can we change this? And then the millennials, we all talk about them, but they are so different. 20% of the kids, undergrad at Stanford, they want to work for a social organization, 20%. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was 1%. 10 years ago, I was in Stanford, I was saying social, people were saying, are you communist? It's very interesting. The world is changing because the 3 generations want to do good at the same time.
Great. Pam?
So I'm with Alex. It's dynamic. It's very fast-moving. It's absolutely happening at a level of unprecedented change, and we're seeing that with different models, different tools. I think technology, millennials, the other thing that hasn't been mentioned is women. Women have always been at the table with philanthropy, but now they're there with their wallets, and they're there with the wealth creation that's occurred over the last decade. And so they've got real intention and purpose around driving this change and really contributing in philanthropy in ways they haven't had the ability to do in the past.
Great. Faye.
So I will take a slightly divergent view here and say I do think there are some things that are changing. So I do think the growth in philanthropy absolutely is changing, and we see that in the Fidelity example and many others. And we have more foundations, many more dollars than we ever had before. But I think there are some new models, but I think we sometimes overclaim what is new. So there have always been philanthropists who cared about results. It's not like we discovered outcomes in the last decade. Carnegie cared about results. Rockefeller cared about results. Others cared about results. Even when you gave to your kids' after-school program, you cared about results. So I think there are some new things, and some of the new things, and we can talk about some of those examples, are falling flat or might fall flat, and we have to learn from them. So I would say there is a pace of change. There's going to be volatility. So that's my answer.
Great. All right, well, we have a nice, diverse slate of perspectives here, so thank you all. Now, let's start to dive into these mindsets a little bit more. I want to start with you, Pam. In your research and your experience working with the donors at Fidelity, what do you see are the shifts or trends that are impacting mindsets and the way donors think about impact, the way they think about giving, and for the baby boomers and the millennials?
Yeah, so philanthropy is a very personal thing to individuals, right? I mean, this is something that in some instances the causes find the individuals, and some you go out and seek it out. Your peers bring you to things that you're going to invest in, and I think a lot of that has to do with how you were raised. And I think you have boomers who have been very generous, but largely it was after they had created their wealth. Millennials who have grown up doing community service, giving back, using social media, stay connected with the world, their peers, the causes they care about, and they are very open and very confident and very in the moment, very contemporaneous. So the research we've done at Fidelity Charitable, kind of comparing the millennials to the 84 million millennials against the 72 million boomers, is that they're very different mindsets. The boomer is much more intentional, wants a strategy, wants to think about it a little bit. Millennials are like, I'm going to give money right now. How do I do that, right? How do I drive the change right now? How do I get involved? How do I engage? How do I bring my followers, my neighbors, my friends, my colleagues to this cause? So they're much more spontaneous and much more willing to be right at the table. The second thing is they're really confident about the change that they can drive in the world. They're either at that stage yet where they're like, I don't care what just happened. I can change that. I can bring my network. I can bring my friends. I can bring my financial purse to that issue and help drive change in the world. Just seeing what we've seen down in Florida happening.
Great. Silvia, let's get your thoughts on this as well. Before you were at Co-Impact, you were the global head of philanthropy at UBS, and so interacted with a lot of high net worth individuals, philanthropists, boomers, and next gen. Would you concur? Are there additional trends that you've seen and shifts in mindsets?
I would certainly concur, especially for the millennials and for what's happening in the developed world. And I would say that some of the philanthropists that we've met in developing countries maybe are taking a little bit longer to come to the same realizations. My experience of philanthropy, working with philanthropists pretty much all around the world, is that philanthropy, it's still, especially for the older generations, largely driven by passion. It's still a very personal and individual affair. Collaboration is usually an afterthought. After I create my thing, I'm willing to collaborate with others. And the third thing is many people say that they want to take risks, but in the end they end up choosing very conservative causes. And to me, the issue with all of this is that whilst those choices may make sense for you as an individual philanthropist, they don't make sense for the system of philanthropy and for deploying capital in the most effective ways. So I'm seeing changes in this regard, and there are trends that are changing this, and we are seeing philanthropists more caring about impact, more caring about strategy. We are still seeing collaborative efforts like Epic Foundation, like Co-Impact, but the pace of change there is a little bit slow for my taste.
Mm-hmm. So Alexander, why don't you jump in here? Before you started Epic, you spent a year doing market research, traveling around the world, and you talked to philanthropists of all shapes and sizes, young and old, and you gave us a flavor of what you've heard. Talk to us a little bit more about that and the what is driving folks to give more, but also what's preventing them from giving more.
It's interesting. Before starting Epic, I took Epic as the startup. So I said, when we start anything, when you don't know something well, you start with a market research. That's what we all do. And when you are an entrepreneur, you're always trying to find 2 points, point A and point B. Point A is where people are. Point B is where people want to go. And if the gap between A and B is wide enough, you have a business to build against the gap. So I was looking after these A and B points. And I spent years, wasn't a year, but years to go after a lot of great people. So how did it work for you? How did it work for you? What I realized was very interesting. Wherever I was going around the world, I was asking 2 questions, and maybe we can get some interactivity this morning. Can you just raise your hand in the audience if you have given money to any social organizations last year? Can you just raise your hand? Keep your hands up. So we have a great audience. Very just it's philanthropy. That's great. Can you keep your hands up if you believe having given enough last year? Okay, it's up. Yeah. So that was very interesting to me. We are at the center of the center of the center of the center of good people at Milken, right? Right. And even here, we know we have not done enough. Yeah. That's interesting. So we started this, and after we were asking Melissa and Aude and Jimmy, why not? Always the same 3 answers. Wherever I was going, LA, New York, Paris, London, Bangkok, I don't trust. We don't trust people, yes? So in a social entrepreneur, even less. So we know what they do with the money, with scandals every other year. 2, we don't have the time. 3, we don't have the knowledge. So when you have everything together, how can we change this? That's the answer to why we don't give more and why we're holding this back. So what we do, and that's what you said, we give to a kids' school, we give to our schools, we give to our church, synagogue, mosque, and we give, when we get older, we give to hospitals. That's maybe a way, connection between the 2. And that's normal. How can we change this? And that's what we do at Epic. That's what you do. That's what most people in this panel, in this room, how can we change this? Because let's be super clear. If we don't change this, if we keep believe that the Gates of the world will do everything, we are in big trouble. Philanthropy has to be everywhere. If the guy just at the entrance, if he wants to give 25 cents, he should be able to give 25 cents. And that's the same for everyone. So the world has changed. And thanks to technology, as you mentioned, Pam, before, we can do way more. And for sure, people want to see where the money goes, but that's a different story.
Great. So, Fay, I want to ask you to jump in now. So we've talked a bit about individual philanthropists, significant, high net worth individuals, everyday philanthropists. Let's talk about foundations and some changing mindsets and foundations. And there's a kind of a shift towards, and I think to this point of maybe the trust issue, but the changing that relationship between grantor and grantee and working with them to truly understand what the people you are trying to help, what they need. Can you talk a little bit more about needing to listen more and this changing mindset of being more partners with your grantees?
Sure, that's a lot of questions, but I'll do my best to answer at least some of them. You can keep me honest if I don't answer all of them. And I think when you think about the word philanthropy, right? The word philanthropy means love of humanity. So for some time now, I've been part of the whole strategic philanthropy movement, pushing strategy, using evidence, measuring results. All of that is quite important. I would never argue that it isn't. And a lot of big foundations, institutional foundations that have significant resources are being more strategic, and I think that's a good thing. But I think sometimes we forget what we're really supposed to be about, which is the love of humanity. And so part of my push in recent years has been to get back to listening deeply, systematically, routinely, consistently, authentically to the people and communities that we're seeking to help. Yeah. To hear their ideas, their perspectives, their preferences about how they'd like to improve their lives. Because sometimes, as smart as we all are, we don't have all the answers, and neither do experts or researchers. People are expert in their own lives. So that is, it's still an aspiration, I would say, Melissa. But it's an aspiration that many more foundations are paying attention to. So in a recent study of foundation leaders a couple of years ago, foundations were asked a similar question to what Alex just asked this audience. Do you think you could have more impact? They all said yes. And the next question, or a question somewhere later in the survey, was, what is the tool? What would help you have more impact? And there was a long list. And the number one thing on that list that was checked the most times was listening more to the beneficiaries, to the intended beneficiaries, the people that we're seeking to help, to understand them better. We think that's the number one tool for having greater impact. So we can talk about it more, but part of my passion and work in this last 5 years or so has been to create more tools that are easy to use, elegant to deploy, that can help both nonprofits and funders be closer, bridge that gap between funders and the people and community that we're seeking to help.
Great. All right, so let's shift now from mindset to mechanisms. What are the new mechanisms that are emerging to allow for giving? And Silvia, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing at Co-Impact. And you're trying to achieve impact at scale through a systems-based approach. What does systems change mean to you, and how is a model like Co-Impact delivering on that?
Yes. So Co-Impact is a new collaborative of philanthropists. Our core partners so far include Richard Chandler, Bill and Melinda Gates, Jeff Skoll, Ramesh and Kathy Wadhwani, and the Rockefeller Foundation. And they have all come together and pooled their funding to be able to enable large-scale systems change philanthropy. So we have two objectives overall. The first one is to improve the lives of millions of people around the world by supporting initiatives in education, health, and livelihoods. And the second one is to try to encourage more philanthropy to go towards this big-scale, large change initiatives. So what do we mean by systems change? This is a question that can be debated forever, but for us, it starts with working with the communities, to Fay's point, who want to change something within their own community. So working with the communities, with the NGOs, with the government, with business. So it's bringing all the actors that can fix broken systems together. That's the first point. The second point is about making it large scale and a step change, something where you can say it's a before and after, and it affects millions of people, not just hundreds or thousands. And the last point is an element of sustainability. Ideally, if we're practicing systems change, over time, you would not necessarily need the funds from philanthropy, or you may need them for other things, but not for the core of the change that you're trying to achieve. So this is pretty much our definition of systems change. And at the moment, we've been working with a number of social entrepreneurs to prepare their systems change efforts, and we will be announcing our first grants this September.
Great, well, stay tuned. Fay, you've been involved with some collaborative efforts as well, Blue Meridian and others. Can you tell us a little bit about the promise of these, and maybe the headwinds and the tailwinds that they're facing?
Yeah, and I think these fall into the category of really interesting, good new models, I think. So, and just to put a plug in for Co-Impact, we're in early conversations with Co-Impact about integrating feedback from the community as part of the systems change effort. So I love that Co-Impact is open and excited about that. And so is Blue Meridian. So Blue Meridian Partners and Co-Impact are similar models. Blue Meridian is another effort. Blue Meridian Partners was started by the Edna McConnell Clark Foundation, which, I'll just tell a little short history of the Edna McConnell Clark Foundation. They started, a few decades ago with funding from the Avon fortune. And they were kind of a regular foundation, not unlike the Hewlett Foundation or Ford or others, that had about 5 different areas of giving. And they were doing good. And they had a new CEO who came in, Mike Balin, at one point, and he took a look at the programs and said, these are good, and they did a whole assessment, but we think we can do better. And so they then went on a path to basically focus They made some transition grants, responsibly exited, and then they decided to focus all of their resources on one issue, the most vulnerable youth in this country. And they developed a very elegant strategy, which is to find proven programs and scale them, working with the most vulnerable youth in this country. And they were so excited about that. They were one of the first funders of Harlem Children's Zone, first funders of Nurse Family Partnership to scale nationally, the Center for Employment Opportunities and so forth. They then realized, well, we can take our $1 billion endowment and do this, but we could also get others to join us. And so they began to aggregate capital, and they experimented with the Social Innovation Fund, and they developed this Youth Development Fund. That was successful. They did that for about a decade. And then recently, with all the giving pledgers making commitments to give their money away, wanting to have impact, but not wanting to set up legacy institutions, basically, Ed McConnell Clark said, we're going to start a new venture where we're going to raise $1 billion of funds. And we're going to have general partners and limited partners. And all we're going to focus on is helping the most vulnerable children and youth in this country. And we're going to find proven programs, very promising programs, evidence-based, and scale them to help millions of people and try to make a dent in the trajectory of poverty. And so they also have a really impressive array of general partners. So Stanley Druckenmiller is the chair, and George Kaiser is a member, and Dave Tepper, and then there are limited partners. And so the Hewlett Foundation is a limited partner, and we come in at a level of 10 or 15 million. The general partners come in at a minimum of 50 million. And within a fairly short order, they have aggregated $1 billion. They're now on their second $1 billion fundraising for the next tranche of time. And what's amazing about it is that it's lean, but it's disciplined and serious. So it's not just putting money and making a big announcement. It actually, there's a lot of diligence. There's big grants that they're making, $60 million grants to scale organizations. That's unheard of in this sector. It has never been seen before. So while I expressed skepticism earlier about models, this is a model that is really worth watching.
Good, that's fantastic. So,
Could I just add a point there? I would say that's exactly, you've described what Co-Impact is doing, except Blue Meridian Partners focuses within the United States, whilst Co-Impact is focusing on developing countries in different parts of the world. But it's pretty much the same approach.
So
and it's a systems change.
It is systems change. It's up to 50 million. It's all the support that these entrepreneurs need. So it's not only the money, but it's all the technical support that they will require to really scale up significantly.
So we've talked about mega collaboration around mega donors, big donors. Let's talk about EPIC, which is can be mega donors or everyday donors. Tell us about how you're aggregating capital and creating a collaborative model with EPIC.
Yeah, so it's again, I think it's amazing what you are doing here, just going after billions. But if you take Apple, just Apple, if you can remind me just the profit of Apple last year, 60 billion, right? 55, 60. So money is there. The point is, how can we just try to share a slice of that success to social good? And that's what kind of mechanism is. How can we just engage more and more businesses to do this? Why they have to do this? It's interesting. When you define business leaders in the world, you have three types of business leaders. You have the Gates of the world. You have those people who are social good activists. They are doing good because they understand it's important. They don't do this for any other reason. It will cost them a ton, but they don't care. They do good because it's important. On the other side of the spectrum, you have, remember these Scrooge McDuck? You remember those Uncle Scrooge? You remember those guys?
Of course.
Remember them. Now, it's interesting. 25 years ago, those guys were stars. They were barely the ones we want to become. Swimming in the sea of gold coins. Wow. It's very interesting. It's over. This era is over. Why? Because you have 80%, most of us, we are pragmatic. We will do good because we understand it's better. It's better for what? It's better for our employees. Because if we don't change this, I can tell you that it will be impossible for us to recruit the top talented kids. It will be impossible to retain them. What is interesting? They will stop buying our product. Look what happened to Uber. Lyft was on the verge to die. So close. And Uber did so many bad things for so long that Lyft was able to raise money and gone. And now they're the first to give tips to the driver. They're first to put just transaction giving when it's done in their life back there. Because it was easy to switch from one product to another. For some other brands, and I won't name them, it's hard to switch from one to another. So we keep some brands even if we don't like what they're doing. And the fourth reason is a bit more important to most of us, is their families. When we come home with, and I think the same here, we have the same questions from our kids. How was your day, Mom? How was your day, Dad? And if the only answer we're able to give is, oh, we made just 5% growth this year, or up in 3 more offices, the kids, it's over. They go back on Snap or Facebook, every single 8 them doing, but they will keep doing it. And they won't ask this question twice. So why it's changing? And mechanism is easy. So I won't just take 20 minutes to explain the mechanism, but what we're doing at Epic, we're trying to find ways to embed social good within businesses, with individuals for sure, but also businesses, on paycheck, on transactions. What we do when you said, we want to make giving the norm. What does that mean? It means in 7 years from now, we started everything 3 years ago. It's a 10-year stint. In 7 years from now, we will all have the option to give at least once a day. If I'm going to just store, paycheck, in theater, booking train, whatever I'm doing, I should have the option to give a slice of what I have to others. Because if we are able to do this, I can tell you what's changing the human nature. And yes, I love the billionaires in the world. I love the giving pledgers, but they will never be enough. So we all need to do more, and we need to give access to more and more people to be part of this movement.
Great. So Pam, you've heard a few different collaborative models. How do we get the collaborative models to collaborate?
Yeah. So that's the big opportunity. So Fidelity Charitable is actually it's a 25-year-old platform that's been available for the average American with as little as $5,000 to be able to set up their own foundation and then give the money away in $50 increments using technology and service. And we serve both donors, advisors, and obviously nonprofits as well. And there are 1.6 million nonprofits in this country, and 80% of them, as I heard yesterday, have less than $1 million in endowment. And so we've got to figure out how the nonprofits can come together, and we need a mechanism for how we can have them accomplish that. But then I think we all have to figure out what are the best models that can allow us to get at these issues of change. And I'm very encouraged by the SDGs and the United Nations and 160 countries stepping up and deciding that this is the framework by which we're going to drive change in the world. And I think here in the US it has really not gotten enough traction, and we at Fidelity Charitable are going to bring more knowledge to our donors around that. But I think we've got to collaborate more. We've got to get more educated on each other's models and the good work that we're doing, and evangelize that to the people that care about the causes that are being focused on as a result of this. So there's huge opportunity, and that's the thing I find the most frustrating, is that everybody kind of goes off and takes their own lens in terms of how they're going to address the issue, and they think they have all the solutions. I think to your point around they're the smartest people. I've been very successful in business. I know exactly how to get this done. And we work with a lot of donors of enormous wealth who need a lot of education and a lot of information and a lot of guidance and advice around how to think that. And the Milken Institute has been a phenomenal provider of that to some of our donors. But there's real opportunity. And a session like this is great for us to all be learning about each other's platforms and the work that we're doing so we can share it.
Yep, great. All right, so let's talk a little bit about technology now, and how that can be an enabler of giving and smarter giving and more effective giving. Pam, you've talked about making giving as easy as to shop on
accessible, simple, and effective, right?
On Amazon.
Well, that's our challenge. So I think you have to remember that kind of this whole charitable giving, certainly, and of course I'm focused on the U.S., came out of the 1917 tax reform, whatever it was called back then, creating this deduction for charitable giving for U.S. taxpayers. And we just celebrated the 100th anniversary, and nobody really, by the way, wanted to celebrate it because we were so afraid it was going to go away through tax reform. I was like, because we got to get out there and talk about this. It's like, ooh, that could just just mean that that'll just be on the chopping block. And it survived tax reform, and frankly, there's some great provisions in the new tax law that I think are going to allow us, particularly on the impact side, learning about those opportunity zones. But there's also opportunity for you to continue to take the deduction, which is in some instances very motivating for people, and some people they're giving and they couldn't care less about the tax deduction. But what we realize is with 100 years and an enormous amount of fragmentation, you need to simplify the experience. How can you have a frictionless experience with the nonprofit that you're trying to give to? And so that's what we've tried to do, is invest in technology that allow you to use the web, now an app, to make your giving simple and easy. And that's a lot of what we spend time on every day, is how do we make it a great experience so that if you're sitting there at a fundraiser talking to somebody about the cause that you care about, how can I just pick up my phone, just look, okay, I want to give $100. We vet the charities to make sure that they're legitimate organizations. That's a very big part of what the model that the DAF provides, is vetting the charities to confirm they're legitimate, and you'd be shocked at how much mischief there is. That's a nice way for describing the nonsense that goes on in the nonprofit sector. There is in that, to be able to make sure that the money is going to a legitimate organization that's going to help drive impact. And technology is enabling us to do that, just like Amazon enables us to buy all our supplies instead of go to the grocery store.
So technology is helping us to make it a frictionless process. Technology, I'm going to throw a few questions out. And
Can I just offer a slight challenge to that?
Go for it.
Okay, because you said this should be a discussion.
Yeah.
So I do think that the platform that you're describing is a good one, and I do think that the diligence that you do to make sure that charities are legitimate is true. But what we don't really have in the sector is a way to understand the impact in a transparent way that nonprofits are having. So just to be really clear about that, it's not like there's a platform that would say, okay, this organization is really driving this much impact with these young people or these women, or this is a much better domestic violence program than this one. We just don't have that. So in terms of when we use the language of driving impact, you just have to interpret it with a big grain of salt, because you have to do much, much more diligence to really understand which organizations and which programs really are driving impact and which aren't, because we just don't have that kind of transparency in our platforms right now. Even though there's been efforts to create them, they haven't really manifested yet.
So you could be completely overwhelmed and paralyzed by all the choices that you have, right?
Yeah.
Or you can do some research, make a decision, and go. And I think that's what we're trying to have happen, right? I know that there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines right now, not just in DAFs. By the way, we have a 25% payout rate. There's so much misinformation about the DAF payout rates, which is much more significant than foundations, and a lot of our clients also have foundations. There's a place for every model here, but I do think that we want information about those organizations, but we want it now.
Yeah.
And there's GuideStar and Charity Navigator and Giving Compass, and there's give.org, and lots of organizations, including Fidelity Charitable, that are trying to not necessarily get the silver bullet, but get enough information that people feel like, okay, this is good, I can go and make a decision. Because you're paralyzed with all the choices that are out there and all the tools. And one rating organization may say, if you're paying your staff more than median salary, that's not a good thing. And frankly, I want talent coming to these big issues. I want the most talented, intellectually stimulated, passionate people working at the nonprofits around the world. And we've got to figure out how to maybe pay them differently and not penalize them as a result of doing that. So I completely agree that its impact is a little bit amorphous, but it's also we need to do something.
Do you think we'll get there? Can technology help us to do that through AI and machine learning and big data to navigate all these different nonprofits? I mean, MIT built an algorithm that can tell you what is going to be your favorite wine. I mean, are we going to be able to reach nirvana there in terms of being able to identify which nonprofit we should be giving to?
I doubt that personally, but I think what technology can help is just in providing a tiny bit more transparency on impact. So one organization that I can mention is Give Directly, where they have the recipients of this unconditional cash transfers, as soon as they receive the money or very quickly thereafter, upload a picture of themselves and a quote of what the impact they say it has had for them. Now, it's not a full evaluation. It's not telling you for sure your gift has had impact, but at least there's a little bit more transparency in knowing what's happening. Yeah. And I think in that regard, technology can help.
Alexandre?
Yeah, I think when we started everything 3 years ago, so it was easier for us. We were more agile because we were able to build everything. So we went after the GuideStar, Charity Navigator, Give.org. We went to see how everyone said, how does it work? What do you think is doable? What is not doable? What is working well? From the Robin Hood to many great organizations. And we built something very close to the PE world. So that's what we've been doing. When you invest your money somewhere, it's, you're pretty sure that the guy who will just manage the money will do diligence correctly and everything. So we've been doing exactly the same. So the way it works, every year we select 10-ish new organizations tackling issues. But we start with a big number. But we don't find this organization ourselves. So we go after the Pam, the Fay, just the amazing people. Say, what's your favorite ones? Tell me the ones you have selected last year. And from this, we have this pool of amazing social organizations around the world. So last year we got from the network 3,600 applications, but already pre-vetted by amazing people. But this was way too many. You mentioned the number of choices. When we have more than 7 choices, we procrastinate. 7. So 3,600, you can imagine, it would take you forever. So after we adjusted another team, and the team have built 45 data points. So we use AI to get the 3,600 to 200. That's something we can do with AI. We can have information, but after, it's human. And it takes us 7 months, go from this big number to this tiny number, including 2 months where we visit them. So you start next week in New York, and during 8 weeks, we'll be traveling the world to meet the organizations, because at some point, we're not robots. We need to meet the people, the beneficiaries, as you said. We need to learn, we need to listen, we need to improve. So that's what we do. It's always, we have 2 hemispheres up there. One is about the data, one is about the metrics, but the other side is love, pain, passion. Yeah. And that's why we believe we'll make more and more people giving if we're able to answer both of those hemispheres.
Mm-hmm. And how can you use technology to help on the love, pain, passion piece as well?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So after what we are, that's the first thing when we ask people to give better. But after people are saying, I still want to see where the money goes. So we've been building an app, and a new app, but it's doable because we don't have 65,000 organizations within the portfolio. We're 30 organizations, and we're defining with them, so it's not us, is with the social entrepreneur, with the NGO, what are for you the data points important for donors? And we work together, and then we are able every day. If for you, it's if you're giving money and giving pills to those people in Uganda, I want to know how many pills, how many people have been treated 2 months ago. Or with NFP, an amazing organization, how many of those women, first time just a woman, have been followed by a nurse in San Francisco, in Denver, in Los Angeles. And I don't want to wait 6 months, a year. I want this now. Why? Because that's what we'll do. First thing we're checking in the morning is our freaking phone. Yeah. When you will go back to your office, to your home, you have 15 minutes, 20 minutes in Los Angeles. It will take you 60 minutes to go to your home. So you have time to use this. And the last piece of it is interesting, is about the experience of it. So we are pushing people to go and visit organizations because we all know it changes everything. But we're also using VR. So we have goggles here if you want to try this. And we're not using technology for the sake of using technology, or to be featured in TechCrunch or in Wired. We don't give a shit of being featured there. We're doing this because people will find something. And even more important, it will find something with their kids. Because as you know, it's very hard to bring kids when they're 13, 14, 12 to those organizations because they have child policy. It's very hard to bring them to those organizations. But as moms and dads, we want to show them something different. So when you engage them with the tool they're using every day, they'll love this. And they understand why we are doing what we're doing and why they would have to follow the same pathway.
Great. So another technology theme that has been present here at the Milken Institute, financial technology, cryptocurrencies, blockchain. How is this going to impact the philanthropic space? I know you've seen tremendous growth on your platform.
Yeah, no, we, and it was interesting to try to figure out how this evolved. Well, we took in 60 million in Bitcoin last year. And what's wonderful about it is, of course, a huge appreciation and run up, but is we're able to liquidate it generally within about 30 minutes. So because working with a third party to do that, and then you're getting the money into the account. And frankly, a lot of the crypto donors have also been incredibly generous in granting, so they're using it for philanthropy. I think a lot of it was we talked about it, and all of a sudden everybody's, because it's a real community. They talked about it a lot, and people saw this as a place for an ability to kind of get the appreciation, but also to do good with it as well. And now we're looking at blockchain for the grant making and starting to explore opportunities for how we can make it faster, because so much about this is getting the money from point A to point B to the nonprofits, and trying to do that, we generally try to do it within 2 to 5 business days.
Yeah, that's great.
I think another comment about technology, if I can.
Yeah, please.
Which is, I have two favorite technologies. One is the one that my son uses, the Razoo platform, which, he's part of the Jewish Teen Foundation, so he's raising money for causes, Jewish and non-Jewish around the world. And so he's able to do, make a little video, put it online, send it around. I don't know, it's very simple, but
good.
But I love it. And it's a really good educational tool. He watches YouTube. He now has a video on YouTube. So it appeals to the younger people, sort of along the lines that Alex was talking. But my favorite technology that, speaking of NFP, so one of the things that we developed, the tool that we developed a few years ago, a group of us, is called Listen for Good, which is a very simple tool on the SurveyMonkey platform, which is ubiquitous. Every single nonprofit uses it, which is 5 questions, borrowing from the business sector, the Net Promoter Score. How likely are you to recommend this nurse-family partnership program? How likely are you to recommend this after-school program? Calculate a score, and you can compare your program to other programs. We developed this tool on the SurveyMonkey platform. We're developing benchmarks so that one organization, one program can compare to similar programs. And it's been amazing. We now have several hundred nonprofit organizations who are part of the prototyping for us. We're planning to open it up publicly on the SurveyMonkey platform. SurveyMonkey's been a great partner, so it's been a great private partnership with them so that any nonprofit who has a SurveyMonkey membership can use it, with these 5 tested questions that ask the nonprofit customer about their experience receiving a service or product. So Nurse-Family Partnership is the most studied program probably on the planet, but never had they ever asked the moms, the first-time moms, how they were experiencing the nurse visit. So the new CEO there, Roxanne White, came in and said, we're losing some moms from our program. We know we want to reach more moms than we are. Maybe we should ask them. And so while they are a $100 million a year organization, they took a $60,000 grant, relatively small grant, to do this Listen for Good prototype. And they sent out to 10,000 first-time moms, with a little bit of resistance from the nurses at first. They were a little worried what they were going to hear from the moms, but they sent out via text to these first-time moms the Listen for Good 5 questions. How likely are you to recommend? What are the strengths of the program? How could it be improved, and so forth? How likely are you to be treated with respect by the nurses? They sent out 10,000 texts. Within 10 minutes, they got almost 1,000 responses back. And it blew their minds.
Fabulous.
And the first thing that these moms said was, thank you for asking. We get inundated with surveys like this all the time, right? The Milken Institute's probably going to send us one too, like how would you rate this conference? But these moms do not get asked about their service experience. They don't. And so just being given that opportunity was such a sign of respect to them. And then they had a lot of good suggestions about how nurse-family partners, they loved it. They had a lot of good feedback. The nurses were happy to hear that they had a lot of positive feedback from the nurses. But they also said, we think that there's ways that you can improve. Like, instead of giving us these big binders of materials that we can't move from apartment to apartment very easily, we have to throw away, can you put all your materials on an app? Another use of technology. And it's run by middle-aged people who never thought about that, And so now they have putting all their materials on an app because all these moms are using their phones. So that process of using technology in a very simple way to listen and respond has been so powerful. And so in 2020, we're going to open it up, Listen for Good on the SurveyMonkey platform. You can have all your nonprofits use it, and you can actually compare across all customer-facing nonprofits. So it becomes a measure that you can actually use across any customer-facing nonprofit. You can aggregate and compare and use it to drive improvement.
That's great.
With the NPS model.
With the NPS model.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be overcomplicated.
It's very simple.
Yeah.
It's very simple.
Yeah. So we're gonna take a few questions from the audience now. I saw some hands already starting to go up. Whoa, there's a lot. All right, let's do three questions, and then we'll curate those.
So this is a quick one for the whole panel. There are place like Donors Choose, where you can get a direct,
Yeah.
give money to a school, you know exactly what it's going for, you might even get a note back. And I'm sure you can give money for malaria pills or water in Africa for people who need it. But for places where you want to have physical contact with the giving, and whether you're in LA, New York, Chicago, whatever, and you want to actually go somewhere, where would you find those types of things if you want to include your family members, even kids that you have, to do things like that?
Okay, let's hold that
Yep.
one. Do we have, how about, since you're in the back, let's just do that one right there.
My name is Ambassador Kobe Crimson, former ambassador of Ghana to US. And I had an interview yesterday. I did an interview yesterday with Lifestyle on philanthropy and impact given. One of the areas that I stress as an area for consideration, the giving has focused quite a bit on going through NGOs who have great access, and they've been in various countries for a number of times. There's a new mindset going on in Africa. And the mindset among the leaders is moving from aid to trade. And that mindset is an area that I'd like to make a recommendation, because there are so many young people who are very, very entrepreneurial, but don't have access to or don't know the NGOs to access funding from. I just came back from Namibia, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Ghana just a week ago. I spent 3 months there. And I've done a number of microfinancing in a number of African countries. So if I may recommend, with all the goodwill attached to the giving, that perhaps a new niche be created where these young entrepreneurs, and I'm talking kids from college or kids in college at the various universities, who are creating their own areas of entrepreneurship that will blow your mind.
Yeah.
That if we can probably maybe look into that area, I'm available to assist in any way possible, because I've traveled the continent quite extensively.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
it's
I bet we have some thoughts on that. Let's do one more. How about let's do down Stephanie. Let's do Steph right here.
Hi. I just was curious. It was so great to hear the example of Give Directly come up. I mean, one of the things I always struggle with is this tension that I'm seeing in the sector between aggregation and disaggregation. So more aggregated capital models like Epic and Co-Impact and Blue Meridian, at the same time as we're seeing models using technology to take intermediaries out of the picture. Just any thoughts or reflections on that?
Okay. All right. Anyone want to take the first one? How do we have more physical contact with the nonprofits?
They would love to have you volunteer. They would love to have you volunteer. I mean, pick a cause that you and your family really care about. Do some research around that organization, and pick up the phone or send an email to the executive director. They will set an experience. And I mean, I think it's really quite easy. Or you can go on Points of Light, which is the largest volunteer organization in the country, and learn about where you can give in your community. One of the things that, because I'm involved in lots of organizations around volunteerism, and one of the things that's a little bit of a tough rub is you do have to be trained. So, kind of going through that process and getting your family trained on how to be good volunteers so you can give back and have a really meaningful experience, I think is an important component as well.
But Pam, I think it's a very interesting question, because I got this question many, many times. So it proved that something is missing.
Yeah.
There is not a platform we trust enough that I can bring my kids, I can go, because maybe the impact of this organization, this local food bank, won't be as good, if we can say good, as another organization just elsewhere. But still, they're doing such an amazing work, and for what you're looking for is perfect. What we're always saying is a balance. A lot of people, when I started everything 5 years ago, I was saying we'll only go in developing countries, because you remember the effective altruism for $100, it will be more helpful over there. And when I spent a lot of time in the US, a lot of people said, Ghana, it's great, but where it is, I want to help the people just in Chicago, in New York. And that's why EPIC is 50-50. It's 50% of the organizations are locals, or the NFPs of the world, and 50% are elsewhere. Because I'm not here to judge if you prefer going to Africa or to Asia or to your local organization. But what is important at some point is doing both. But back to the question from you, I do think, and we need to find a way to have a platform where people can volunteer and be sure that where they will spend time will be just, barely just good time spent. Yeah. And it doesn't exist for now. But we have a lot of social entrepreneurs, young kids from college who are trying to find just ways to make this happen.
Let's go to the point about social entrepreneurship and how do we create an environment to support them, thinking about aid to trade. Sylvia, do you want to take that first?
So as I mentioned before, the three areas we focus on are education, healthcare, and livelihoods. Within livelihoods, one of the biggest issues is youth employment. And here we are looking at entrepreneurship as a way of preparing youth for their own future and for creating those jobs that maybe also because of technology will not be there tomorrow. So this is certainly an area we're looking at, and right now we're sourcing a number of opportunities, in particular in Africa, in this regard.
Great. Okay, so Stephanie's question now: how do we use how can technology? All right, Fay.
I love that question.
Okay, we'll do.
Oh, you want to go?
We'll do
Okay.
Fay first, and then we'll go to Sylvia.
Yeah, I love that question because, of course, it's both. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, the Give Directly model actually has been very rigorously evaluated, and we know that there are many instances where we're bypassing an intermediary and giving just money to people helps them make a bigger impact in their own lives, make their own choices about what they need, whether it's a roof or a dowry, that will make a bigger difference for them in their lives than giving it to a nonprofit to make those decisions for them. So in many cases, that's a great thing to do, give directly. But giving directly is not going to fix a healthcare system, right? So it's not going to do what Co-Impact is doing. So it really depends on what your ambition and purpose is. And you really want to lead with purpose. So if your purpose is to improve people's lives and feel that experience directly and know that you are really making a difference, you're more likely to make a difference in a person's or people's lives materially in the near term, then that's a great thing to do. And if you really are focused on longer term systems change, then giving directly isn't going to do it. So just like we don't have one bank in the country, you know, it's like in the banking world we have many banks depending on what you want to do. Community banks, credit unions, you know, big investment banks, all manner of banks for different kinds of purposes. And so the same thing would be true for philanthropic investment.
Just to quickly echo that. The idea of philanthropy is that it should provide the venture capital for the social world and that we should all experiment. And that's great, but the assumption is that things will automatically be scaled up when they work. And the truth is that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen enough. And therefore, you know, there's so much dispersion of efforts in this space. You quoted some statistics from the US, 80% of foundations. I know globally that number is more than 50% of foundations have less than $1 million. You know, of course you're going to affect a few individuals, 100 individuals, but if you're really looking at scale and big change, then we do need to collaborate and we do need aggregators to try to help the social entrepreneurs to really have significant impact in the world.
Great. All right. Okay, let's do another round.
I'm sorry. I'm impressed with this ambassador said back
Yes.
here. I live in the Middle East, and there's a very interesting gateway happening where people from the U.S. don't know how to access the refugee camps and have an impact. So we've been blessed, this firm I work for, to create a business model that's purposeful, profitable, and sustainable. Okay, and I was able to bridge a group out of Singapore coming through Dubai in a business proposition with some guys in New York to create a diamond security token, which is really very technological, who the owner in Singapore, his wife, runs the Red Pencil humanitarian mission in the refugee camps. So I said to him, if you give this project through us, through Dubai, we'll give half our profits and we'll get the guys in New York to give half the profits to his wife's program in her 23 countries for the Red Pencil humanitarian mission. So what's happened in that model is you use your gifts as business entrepreneurship, your access, your proximity to create sustainability, purposeful outcomes, and therefore impactful.
Yeah, wonderful.
You want to respond to that, Alexandre?
No, I think you have great models. It's back to the pragmatic at the very beginning. You did this, and you won the business, and I'm happy for you. But the beauty of everything is the size of it, and that's what we see. There's less and less value to have success if we don't share that success with others. So it's beautiful. And you have so many ideas and structure. We're talking about technology earlier, but no, it's changing systems. That's what we all want to do here. Yeah. We want to change systems. And to change systems, we don't fight systems. We outsmart systems. That's what we need to do. So we need to think how in the business, in the life, we can just embed social good everywhere. Exactly what you did. And the point is, hopefully next 2 to 5 years, everyone, if they want to get those business, they will have to do the same. Give 50% of the profit, 20%, whatever they want to give. But that's really neat.
Great. Let's do another one. Let's do right down here up front.
I spend a lot of time in Africa in particular, and you see more and more that when money is just given away, it's not valued as much by the recipients. And I think we're seeing a real global trend where people are interested in impact investment. And I haven't heard you talk much about the shift in philanthropy to impact investing and what investors should expect in a return for impact investment. And I would love to hear from you about that.
Yeah, fantastic. And Silvia, I'm going to ask you to talk about this. And fantastic question. And obviously through the conference, we've seen, we've heard, it's real, it's here, it's not on the fringe, it's mainstream. And you were pioneering a lot of this at UBS. So I'd appreciate your thoughts on how is philanthropy playing a role and is being leveraged for impact investing?
So I think there can be multiple circumstances under which philanthropy can help to de-risk a certain situation to make it commercially investable for others. Impact investing is certainly growing. It's an area that I personally support very much, especially the millennials love impact investing. And I have a number of conversations where they say, oh no, I don't do philanthropy, that's the old generations, we do impact investing. At the same time, one of the things that worries me a lot is that people are only focusing on impact investing, and impact investing, as we have seen, cannot solve all the problems in this world. You know, how do you make a hospice for children with cancer in Peru an impact investable proposition? It's incredibly hard. So there are just like in anything financially, one needs to have a portfolio of activities. And it's wonderful if you can have a certain pot for philanthropy that can be deployed in certain ways when needed, where you can do it, impact investing, at a minimum, I would say sustainable investing. And sustainable investing, just the fact that people choose to not invest in industries or practices that are negative for other human beings and for the environment, that could really make a massive difference in this world. So it's certainly very important, and it was an omission in our conversation not to mention it earlier.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, it's a way to unlock some capital, right? I mean, there's a lot of endowments that are sitting out there that are invested in things that aren't related to the causes that these organizations care about. I just went on the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance, and I'm just absolutely incredibly confident and optimistic about the future of impact investing. But having grown up at a financial services company and seeing the purity of thought around investment return and the fiduciary obligations that go with that, there's still a lot of debate, and it's still at nascent stage. And we have $600 million at Fidelity Charitable in impact. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but I think the trend is very much, the trajectory is very much positive. But we need to continue to talk about it at conferences like this, which I was so glad to see that conversation yesterday at lunch.
All right, great. Well, we're going to start to wrap. We're going to get into our final lightning round, our closing. So, each of you share with us what is the best advice that you have for a nonprofit, a philanthropist, a business, an impact investor to navigate this period of transition. Let's start with you, Silvia.
So a couple of weeks ago, Fay and I were at the Skull World Forum, and there the topic was proximity and being close to the people or to the issues that we want. And in reflecting about what we're trying to achieve with co-impact in terms of systems change, I think one of the biggest mistakes we all make, whether we're philanthropists or businessmen or entrepreneurs, is to forget that we are all fundamentally interconnected. We're all part of the same system, and therefore we all personally have responsibility for the societies and the issues that we have created in this world. So my biggest advice would be, let's figure out how we can come together and collaborate to address some of this.
Alexandre.
Yeah, I will say, I'll ask you at the very beginning if you believe you've given enough. So it's interesting, a lot of people came to see me and with my friends here saying, how much do you think I should give? Yeah. It's a question, how much, what is enough? So if you're a Jew, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Catholic, it's 10, 20, 2.5%. It's part of religion. It's ingrained in where we live. If I'm asking you this question, do you have a dime in with you? Do you know 10-cent coin? Do you know where does that come from? The name dime? Anyone here? It comes from Middle Age. You know this because in Spanish it's called dimo. In French it's dime. So it was what? It was not a donation. It was a tax given to the church. Middle Age. And here in the U.S., it's so ingrained in the system that it's a 10-cent coin. So everywhere just you have the giving. And so we're asking our friends, I said, sit down every year, January 1st, with your partner, with your wife, your husband, and define your level of pain. That's very important because giving has to be painless. The day giving becomes painful is not good. So we're always asking if it's 1% for you, if it's 2%, 5%, no one can say anything about this. So I love the Gates, but 50% is crazy. Who wants to give 50% of their wealth? Yeah, sorry, but no, I'm not asking you. I'm not asking. Are you giving 50% of your wealth? So that's the point. If you start putting that kind of pressure on people, so if I give only 45%, I'm what?
This is for ultra high net worth
Yeah,
individuals.
it doesn't
Slightly
work.
different,
No,
right?
it doesn't work because in the US you can't do this. You cannot do this in Europe. You can do it in Asia because the system here just helps you to give this because you have tax cuts. So the truth is, if we start putting pressure on people that they have to give 50%, a lot of people, even at the very low class, they will say, I will never be part of this. Everyone should be able to give something when it's spent less. So let's do a world where giving is spent less, and then giving will be the norm, and then we change something.
Great, thank you. Pam.
So if I'm talking to nonprofits, I'm saying collaborate, collaborate. Really, don't go start another nonprofit. Go find organizations that care about them and kind of bring your leadership to those functions and efforts and causes. The second thing I would say is let's get behind the USGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There's a strategic framework with measurement and focus and intent that is going to allow us between now and 2030 to actually be purposeful in how we solve some of the world's biggest problems.
Great. Fay.
Well, the nonprofit sector is very undercapitalized, so giving more does matter. So I do think giving more is a good thing, but I would want to emphasize how you give, not just how much. So there's a saying that the wise person learns from everyone. And I would leave you with that the wise person, the wise giver, learns from the experts, the people in the field, and the people and communities that you're seeking to help.
Great. Well, I'm going to close with another quote from Benjamin Franklin that said, and he said, when you're finished changing, you're finished. And while we're not finished changing, we are finished talking. So thank you so much for joining us, and please join me in thanking our speakers.